Hello and good evening from Singapore. And I know I just checked right now, and we saw a total of 566 registrations for the LinkedIn event from 35 plus countries, and I kind of stopped calculating it almost an hour back. So first of all, I want to really thank each and every single one of you who has taken the time to be a part of this, signed up for the event, and probably some of you are already live. Probably a few of you will be live in the next couple of minutes. So just a few things which I wanted to start with before we move on to today's speaker. So firstly, I just wanted to ask everyone who is watching this stream or who are watching this video later that do follow the Decode Strategy Labs page on LinkedIn. The reason I'm saying this is also because that, myself as well as every single speaker who comes over here, there is a tremendous amount of hard work involved in the entire process, and it's harder and harder to reach out organically to more and more people. So if you follow the page, you will be able to see the updates for all future events which happen, and you'll be able to sign up to all those future events as well. So follow the Decode Strategy Labs LinkedIn page. And the other thing I wanted to really request all of you is to subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's called The Business of Marketing. And there is a lot of content which I have been sharing for the last 1 year plus. And there is also all the live streams which I do. They are streamed live on LinkedIn as well as on YouTube. So if you visit this channel and if you subscribe to this channel, you can get notifications about all future events, and you can watch the recordings on this channel as well. So that's as far as the channels are concerned. My name is Rahul, and I'm the founder and the chief consultant at Decode Strategy Labs. This is a marketing consulting and an education company that I have started, less than 6 months ago. And I'm based out of Singapore, and this is where I run the company from. And as a part of this company, we also, I've worked very hard to design the strategic marketing course. It's a very elaborate course, taking you from absolute basics to some really high level and evidence-based scientific work which has happened in the world of marketing science. So it's got a collection of all of that. I've really poured in like 15 years of my experience all into this one single course. So I do encourage you to go check out the Decode Strategy website and check out the course. There's also a lot of free resources, the updates regarding the events and all of that. So on that note, I want to quickly bring on the screen our speaker for today, and we have Dan White here. So Dan, you're quite a celebrity, like 560 people, like wanting to listen to you from 35 plus countries.
I'm honored. I'm surprised and honored to have so many people join. Thank you.
So I'll start with the first mandatory thing, which anyone who is doing any live stream with you should do. That is wave their copy of the book. So yeah, so anyone who's watching, this is how I got introduced to Dan, and it's a lovely piece of work. So thank you so much for bringing this book to life. And there's the one aspect of this book which is like the core aspect of this book are all the illustrations that Dan has been doing. So maybe Dan, I know you have planned an introduction for yourself as well, but probably before you do that, it would be great to know a little bit about the history of all these illustrations, which are like so distinct and probably one of those elements that really sets apart your book from anything else that I have seen before, or a lot of us have seen before. So why don't you talk about that first?
Well, yeah, it started off literally 25 to 30 years ago. What I used to do is I always had a notepad. In fact, I've still got a notepad, just like the ones I used to use right here in front of me. And I used to scribble notes and diagrams just to help me remember things I've come across, things I've learned, things I wanted to remember. And I've just always done that. But I found that as people started to work in my teams and with me, that they utilized them. I found them useful to explain concepts to new people, for example, and that led me into training as well. And it even also led me to creating some of the way we sell, when I was at Kantar, the way we talk about and sell our products, because they brought products and ideas to life and thought leadership to life. Anyway, so then just literally a couple of years ago, I thought now's the time to pull them together. So I dusted off a whole pile, a huge pile of these notebooks, and went through and drew them up properly, and then wrote the book around them, and then it came out at the end of last year. So it literally is 25 to 30 years in the making, genuinely.
Awesome. So that's a lot of work. So today you'll be sharing with us, your favorite picks, which kind of go across the different interest areas, the frameworks which you are very, very close to, the frameworks which have interesting stories. So just before you start, I think a couple of house rules for the audiences, or not rules actually, just something that in case anyone has questions, you can drop your questions in the comment section on YouTube, or you can drop them on below the live video that you're watching on LinkedIn. And we have a panel over here where we can see all the questions compiled. So so don't worry about your questions. What we'll do is we'll start with Dan talking through some of his favorite frameworks. Maybe if there are too many questions, we'll take a pause in between, and we will take a couple of questions which relate to those initial few frameworks. And then from there, we'll move on to complete the rest of them. And I'll start, if I have a couple of questions, I'll start myself, and then we'll have a couple of more questions that we'll shortlist from the audience. And depending on time, we'll try and take as many questions as we can. But if we do run out of time, Dan has agreed to answer those questions later on LinkedIn or YouTube or wherever you're leaving those questions. So please feel free to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to the LinkedIn page, and Dan, all over to you. So I'll just cast your PowerPoint. So yeah, so you're all live now. So
great, thank you so much. All right, let's get going. So yes, as Will mentioned, I have brought to share with you today 10 frameworks from the Smart Marketing book. Here they are in front of you now, and I'll be going through them each in turn. But before that, I'm going to talk about my favorite topic, about me, literally just for a couple of minutes. So I've been in market research and marketing for 30 years now, about 20 of those years, nearly 20 in market research and market research, thought leadership. Then moved into a CMO role for another 6 or 7 years, and then finally into capability development and training. Did a little bit of general management as well, but it wasn't really to my liking. And if you notice, there's a very, very thin yellow slice of pie at the top there. Which
it's not titled anything.
It's not titled. It's not big enough to title yet. It's too soon. That's me as a writer and illustrator, which has literally really taken off in the last year or so, really. So that's my sort of background. I have, I guess, 3 claims to fame, I suppose, 3 main ones. I was one of the developers of the brand equity system. That especially those of you in the who've come across or work in WPP will be probably familiar with this. It's used to value the top 100 global brands each year, which is published in the FT. I'm very proud of my contribution because of that. I did appear twice on national television on ITN, and you can tell from the picture there that it was quite a long time ago as a market research expert, and I'm involved in a whole load of very, let's call them inventive marketing events, some of which were good, some of which weren't. In fact, this was one of the worst ones. It was my first one, and it was called My Marketing Director is an Alien. And I had a small role in that very bizarre client event it was. But anyway, I've done better stuff since then, I promise you. Where I live here. This is Stratford upon Avon. Beautiful place. You're probably thinking no one actually lives in a place like that, an idyllic little beautiful little town in the countryside. And you're right, I don't actually live there. I live 3 or 4 miles down the river in Bidford-on-Avon that looks like this, which arguably I think is even better, but there you go. So, no, actually the truth is I live on a bit of an estate, housing estate, the other side of the river, not in that nice part, but it's a beautiful place to walk. So I'm going to get cracking with the 10 frameworks, starting with the marketing mix I. Now, this is essentially a modern take on the 4 Ps of marketing. You know, it's the fundamentals of what you do as the levers you have as a marketer. But what it does is it obviously uses modern terminology, and it shows how all the bits of the jigsaw fits together to ultimately drive purchase, revenue, and profit. So I think it's quite useful. And I think the nice thing about organising it in this way, sort of above and below the I, is that it highlights the need for both, as we might call it, mental availability, particularly driven through media on the top left, but also physical availability, which is essential also for growth. That's the sort of bottom left. And it also sort of shows that ultimately the brand predisposition, you can shape it with advertising and media, but ultimately the service quality, the product quality of, and therefore the user experience will ultimately have the biggest say on whether people are going to like you and want to come back and buy you again. So I find this I use this as a checklist. So it's like a checklist for all the things that you need to make sure you're ticking all the boxes and thinking about all these elements of the marketing mix and how in order to succeed with your brand. So that's the first one. The second one is a bit of a classic, an old classic. It's actually from the 1950s. It's called the Ansoff Growth Matrix. And the way it works is like this. And I think this is probably the first question that you should ask yourself when you're developing your marketing strategy each year and thinking about how are we going to achieve growth. And obviously the starting point is you have an existing market that you're addressing, and you have your existing product or products that you currently sell. And quite often the best route to growth might be called market penetration. In other words, to continue to sell the same suite of products or product and sell them to more of similar people. It actually takes a while before you reach that point of diminishing returns, where there's not much more opportunity from that set of people. But when you do get to that point, you've got to make a big decision, which is whether to expand up or across. Expanding up means you're going to take your existing products to different types of people, quite often to new markets that are in different countries or different regions, etc. That's an obvious sort of next step. That's one route. The other route is through the product development route. So you stick to wherever you're the set of people, type of people you're marketing to now, but you expand your product range, you innovate, bring in new products to grow that way. And the reason I think this is important is because this is not just a marketing decision. This has implications for the whole business in terms of the emphasis, the investment, where investment is put, etc. So, for example, let's just move on. Yeah. So, for example, if you're in the market penetration area, the focus really is on advertising. You need to reach as many of the potential further customers as you can, and on sales activity. If you're expanding to new geographies, for example, you need to understand whether those new geographies are the same or they have different nuances and slightly different needs and contexts that you'll need to adapt to if you want your marketing to succeed in those places as well. Whereas if you're going down a product development route, and you really are relying on having superb pipeline of products that the consumers are going to find really, really compelling. So the focus there is on the innovation, the investment on innovation and how to launch the products as they come out. I didn't really talk about the diversification strategy, and that's because, to be honest, it's quite rare. It's only for companies that have really quite a lot of financial backing and need to land grab very quickly and expand as rapidly as possible. So if you're lucky enough to be in that position, that's great, but you'll need to think about how to manage the expansion and not dilute what your company is all about. Okay, so that's the second. The third one, quite a straightforward one in a way, which is thinking about business KPIs. Now, imagine all of your businesses will have, and businesses that you work with, will have some sort of set of KPIs to monitor business progress and to alert where focus needs to be put. But I'd guess that very few of them have explicit marketing and consumer-related metrics. It's quite unusual for that to be the case. It's great if you have. So I've had a framework here that's almost like the ideal business KPI pyramid for a really customer-centric business, a consumer-centric business, and one where marketing has a seat at the table at the board level and is seen as integral. Now, the reason I like this framework is obviously you have the financial metrics at the top, because ultimately most businesses, the aim is to grow, and then obviously the sort of more granular financial metrics underneath. But then underneath that, having both customer metrics and then the marketing perceptions that marketing drive, shown how these things all contribute to the ultimate success of the business. So that marketing is seen as a core activity, a core investment, rather than a luxury, which unfortunately is sometimes seen as in some businesses. So I'd heartily recommend that if you have an opportunity to influence how the KPIs that are used in a business, to try and make room for at least one or two customer and marketing related metrics like these. Now, the next area, it isn't really a framework per se, but it is a useful way of thinking about brands and how they exist, which I have found personally incredibly useful for understanding how to build brands and how advertising works. And it's like a principle that I think is very useful. So I'm now quickly going to relate a conversation. So this represents a conversation I had with my son, my grown-up son, last summer when we were all stuck at home in the first of several lockdowns, and obviously looking for things to do. And I remembered that there was a TV program that I'd always wanted to watch, that I had never got around to it. And I believed it was on Netflix, but I couldn't remember the name of the program. So I was asked, and so I couldn't search for it. So I said to my son, who I knew had watched this program, say, look, I can't remember. I'll tell you about it. And I could say it's about the police, and someone travels back. They time travel back in time. It's the actor. I remember the actor's name. It's John Sim, who happens also to be on Doctor Who, but that wasn't what I was thinking about. And I could remember that it was set in the 70s, and I knew the name of the program was a David Bowie record. From the time in the 70s, he was called Ziggy Stardust. So I could remember all of these things, and all these neurons, all these connections in my brain were firing, but I couldn't remember the name of the program. Now, just wondering, does anyone know this program? I wasn't sure how far beyond the UK it spread. I believe it's been in several countries. I'm hoping one or two of you out there maybe put it into the comments box if you know what it is, but it's just for fun. The point here is that a brand is whatever fires in people's brains, all the connections that are in individuals' brains that are connected around the brand. And the name itself is an important part of the brand, but it's not the brand. It is just one of those elements that fires. The look of the pack, if it's a packaged goods, fires. The characters in the advertising fire. Memories from childhood might come up for certain brands that have been around a long time. And I've found this incredibly useful. It's that simple. I often think of, a lot of you will know how Pavlov's dogs. The experiment with Pavlov's dogs, where he connected the sound of a bell ringing in the minds of the dogs with feeding time, and found that after a learning period, the dogs would salivate when they heard the bell, showing that the bell itself had become wired in the brain to the food. By the way, Rahul, has anyone got the correct answer on the
No,
comment?
I don't think. I think we've got a pretty global audience, and your question is pretty
UK. I was hoping that it's on Netflix. I was hoping it would have spread more. By the way, if it is on your local Netflix, well, I imagine it is, do look it up. It is called Life on Mars. Yeah.
Life on Mars. Okay.
Life on Mars. Yeah, it's very, very good. I really enjoyed it, but don't bother with the sequel called Ashes to Ashes. Not so good. Runs out of steam. I'll say. But it's on UK Netflix anyway.
Awesome. I'll think.
I was talking about Pavlov's dogs. Yeah, and again, that's a nice way of thinking about it, because a lot of actually what you're doing with building a brand is you're creating these connections over time. And that's why consistency and repetition is a key part of marketing. And actually something I've noticed is slipping away a little bit now, particularly because there's more disposable kind of very short form video or just static social ads that are used once, never used again. If there's a connective tissue across them, that's fantastic. If there isn't, there's a risk that you're not building much.
Yeah.
So for example, this is a drawing. This is what the Apple brand looks like roughly in my head. Well, my head a year ago, actually, because I'm 51. But and what I thought was quite interesting, I showed this to my daughter, and she said, "Oh yeah, I get that," and she recognised some of those elements. Some of those elements were also in her version of the Apple brand in her head. Obviously, the name, the word Apple, and the logo. She was familiar, as she's a designer, so she was familiar with the famous iconic Mac in the bottom right. But she had also some other things in her mental representation, and she didn't have the dancing iPod advert that's on the left there. So it just makes you think, that reminds us rather that a brand it's in the head of the consumer, and it's always evolving, and it evolves over time, and it might be a little bit different for different people or for different generations. And great brands have that kind of connective tissue, but they keep it refreshed and reinforced over time. And that's actually, you could argue, one of the key roles of marketing. Okay, the next one is, I guess this one wins the award for the best acronym. I was so proud when I came up with this acronym and thought, I know, I can draw a Pinata to go with it. It's essentially, if you've come across things like the brand Key that I think Added Value created many years ago, and the brand Onion is quite famous. It's basically a checklist or a framework for thinking about all the aspects of a brand that you need to be clear about if you're going to be able to build a coherent, compelling brand over time. That's the way I think about it. So that's why I use it as well when I'm doing marketing consultancy. So the Pinata stands for purpose, insight, needs and associations, testaments and assets, with the customers in the center. So very proud of that. I know the word testaments is not a very everyday word, but honestly, the meaning is perfect if you look it up. It's forced. Of course, it's forced. All acronyms of this length are. But now I'll take you through how this works. I mean, I think a good exercise I do with the clients is ask them to, at the start point, to see if they can define for their brand all 7 of these. And I haven't yet come across a client who can define all 7 clearly. There are some brands out there that have done it, and I've been following the Snickers brand for years. I've been a big admirer of the way they've approached it and the way they've talked about their brand. So I thought I'd bring this alive using the Snickers example. So Snickers, they have, of course, have customers at the younger end, teenagers in particular, and young adults. Now, the purpose doesn't have to be a high order purpose. I just mean the thing you do for the customer, the thing you do for the consumer. And in this case, it fills you up when you're hungry. It's as simple as that. But they have this lovely insight they've used for many, many years, which is that when people are hungry, or technically when their blood sugar is low, people's temperament can change. People aren't themselves. A lot of people I get grumpy, a lot of people get grumpy or lose focus, lose concentration, that kind of thing. Now that is an insight. It's basically a truth about the consumer that's related to your purpose, but it's something that consumers can identify with. And then once you have a great insight, that can be the inspiration for the marketing and advertising that follows. And that's what they've done so well. Now, the needs area, this means what needs do we want our brand to come up? The English isn't coming out very well here. What needs or occasions when they come up, should our brand come to mind? Yeah. Okay. So what makes people think of our brand? So in case of Snickers, it could be snacking, obviously it's snacking occasions, but particularly maybe a mid-morning need for a snack or something in the middle of the afternoon, or when you're on the move and you know you're going to be hungry and you pick it up at the train station, that kind of thing. You want to have that. And that Byron Sharp talks about category entry points, which is very close, pretty much well aligned with this idea of the more powerfully and the more of those occasions trigger your brand, the better for your brand. And then the flip side is, okay, when they do think about your brand or just see your brand, maybe in the in the confectionery area, then what connotations, what associations come to mind related to the band? Just like we did for life on Mars. In this case, it's the idea of restoring energy, full of strength. The idea of being filling and being a tasty snack. Then often you have testaments, and testaments are often, they can be as elaborate as backstories. Like I think in this case, for years, Snickers used to talk about containing peanuts that are very nutritious to help fill you up. My favourite testaments are probably Jack Daniels. They do some lovely stories and interviews with their teams and show the process, the beautiful process of how they make their whiskey. These are all kind of proof points or stories that help reinforce the association and the need connections. And then assets, right? Assets is absolutely crucial. I don't think the marketing world fully understands the value of having distinctive brand assets. And there can be a sound, a shape, a color. The logo is part of that. It could be a character. There are lots of ways of doing it, but the key thing is to have consistency over time. So in the case of Snickers, the previous campaign had Mr. T from the A-Team. Now, surely, that's an American program, so I'm sure, Raoul, with the A-Team. Yeah, good. And that character was strongly associated. And actually, the catchphrase, "You're not you when you're hungry," has become a distinct asset for the brand. So I hope that brings it alive.
Yeah. So at this point, I had a couple of questions, and I wanted to maybe pause a little bit on the Pinata. Firstly, how the hell did you come up with Pinata? But anyway, so I'm trying to understand, ask you this question from the perspective of people who are watching this, and by the way, to viewers, if you all have any questions on any of the the first 5 frameworks that Dan has shared, it's a good time to post those questions now. You can obviously do it later as well, but I think we are taking a question break of sorts. So I'm asking this question from the point of view of the audience who might want to take this framework and apply it to their brand. They might be founders, they might be people in the marketing department, they might be people who are planning to come up with something of their own. So if you were to actually apply this, is there what is the kind of process that you have used in the past, and what are the things and some of the watchouts that one should keep in mind so that they can do justice to this kind? Because there are too many frameworks. Like you spoke about the brand key, and then there's the brand essence and the brand core and the brand heart and the onion and the apples, oranges, and everything. So, but let's say for a moment, and I really like how this crystallizes the key elements which are important for the brand. But if someone had to use this and apply this, what's a good approach that you would recommend to them?
Yeah. Okay. No. I think there are 2 things to consider here. I mean, the first is depends on how much information and understanding the company, the team already has about the brand and the category and the consumers and their relationship with the category. If they have that, and some brands have been around a long time, or bigger companies, they tend to have more than they think. So actually the first step is often just to collate all of that information that's context for this. Just compile it. Not everyone will have seen it all or heard of it all, but a lot of people will. And then the key thing is to bring together the people, a diverse set of people from the company, and possibly also consumers as well, but potentially, to run essentially a brainstorm session based on their understanding. Yeah. For example, I mean, actually, I do have. Actually, it sounds like a setup, but I haven't mentioned this to you, Rahul, because I've never run one. But I devised a workshop, right? And I was going to launch it in March last year, which is, and the problem is, it absolutely really depended on being in the room, right? Because I actually looked up on Amazon how much it costs to get a big pinata and fill it with sweets, and I was going to hang it from the meeting room and have the stick, and then once we brainstormed and defined clearly, for example, one of the arms of the pinata, There'd be a cathartic moment where one of the team would smash it to say we've smashed it.
Right.
It was a great idea. I thought it'd be really fun and really lively. But I think the point is that you need to bring people together and brainstorm based on that. But the other side of it is quite often maybe you don't know enough about the category and the brand.
Yeah.
And I think, and obviously there are various things you can do there. I mean, the classic way of finding out is to conduct qualitative research designed around, but it's all designed around the consumer, not around the brand. No, you ask them about their relationship with the category. You ask them about how they use brands, but it's all about them. And you talk about the moments when they feel, when they feel hungry. You talk about when they tend to do it, why. They talk about classic exploratory qualitative research. Yeah. And a few clients have done this, not that many, because it's quite a bit more expensive, but actually you can use improv companies. There's one called Second Sight, which is based in several different cities, I think, but based in New York originally, I think, where you would actually, the improv actors and real consumers would work together to create dramatizations and sketches around the category and some of the pain points and personal stories. And oh wow, it's so incredible. It's so evocative. It just gets you really thinking about the consumer world. A bit like ethnography, but in a more, I don't know, exciting, immediate way. If I had the money and I was on the marketing side of a big company, I would definitely want to do that if I didn't know enough about the brands. But anyway, essentially, after that, once you've got the inspiration, it's brainstorm and it's with clever people in a room, figuring out. Yeah.
Awesome. I think there's another question. If you're on the StreamYard screen, I'll just pop it up on the screen. This question is from Pooja. So do you want to take this question? Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Can everyone see that? Can't they, Rahul?
Yeah. Everyone.
No, absolutely. Yes. Essentially, it's reasons to believe, but it doesn't have to be factual, scientific kind of facts that are reasons to believe. It can be, like I said, with a backstory or a story around the brand. So. I mean, people love stories. I've got a whole session about the power and value of storytelling because stories elevate people, identify with them more, they trust them more, and they're much more memorable than just plain facts. So you don't have to have a backstory. It could just be the reasons to believe, especially if those reasons to believe are very, very clear and convincing. Then absolutely stick to the facts. If not, creating a story is a lovely way of making something. I was going to say out of nothing. I don't mean that. I can't. What I meant was bring the truths about the company behind the brand and the brand, to life in a more evocative way. Yeah.
Okay, makes sense. So I think we are already at 33 minutes. So probably we should continue with the remaining frameworks, and then maybe we'll come back to the questions later.
Okay, great.
You don't need to rush. We are fine on time.
Good, great. Okay. So the next one is the topography of customer relationships. The backstory to this particular one is I learned this off a colleague called Roger Sant, who'd worked for years at Research International before it became part of Kantar, and he was an expert in customer experience. And he said, a lot of customer experience research just asks about ratings about every single aspect of service delivery, and trying to establish what's more important, and then rating the brand against it compared with competitors. And you get a lot of data, and it's very hard to make your way through it. But he said, in his experience, that actually there's only certain critical points, and the phrase is like the magical and miserable moments are the ones that count. And they don't happen very often, but how customers are handled in those moments are key. And really, you should be focusing on what are those pain points, So actually, just research when people are really annoyed with your brand, you felt let down. Finding out why and finding out what the most common reasons is probably the most powerful thing you can do. But also, I do like a good visual metaphor. So this one is meant to show that most of the time, right? The customer relationship, which is represented the customer as a ball here, will just be gently rolling around in the kind of indifferent area. Okay, people don't really care that much about brands as long as they're delivering what they expected, to reasonable expectations, they're happy, they're fine, they don't care. Now, it is true that when a customer really needs, particularly in service areas where the high sort of service element, if you give them a great experience when they really need it, you can imagine that ball rolling to the right and just occasionally getting into the delighted area, where actually it's easier to maintain that strong relationship, harder to roll back up the hill. But we know from Byron Sharp's work that it's not a very good strategy to try and focus on getting a small group of people to be super loyal and to sell to them more. It's much more important to get more people into the brand, to get them to become customers in the first place. And obviously all the analysis of Byron Sharp in how brands grow articulates this. But I think it is also incredibly important to understand that growth can only come if your brand survives. Obviously, growth analysis is based on brands that survived, and there is a certain level of cost of entry, a kind of a certain minimum level of service that you mustn't drop below, because if the customer relationship is damaged beyond a certain point, and that's why I talk about pain points, then they'll roll down the hill and they won't come back. And worse than that, they won't come back, and they may well vent their annoyance at the brand through social media. And we've seen brands suffer and die just because of bad experience, happening too many times and too much negative PR happening. So really, it's more the left-hand side that's crucial. And I think that's where research is very valuable, to really understand what are the moments and circumstances that you must focus on. And it's worth making sure that you're strong on those basics.
So there's another.
Oh, that's on a more positive note. Let's talk about innovation. We know that innovation is the lifeblood of a successful brand. The best, the biggest, most successful brands in the world are the ones that keep coming up with new ideas, keep thinking of ways to make the customer experience or the consumer experience better all the time, keep innovating, or even innovating to just make the operations of the company much more efficient, leveraging technologies in new, interesting ways, etc. And again, thinking about how to actually implement this, session, where what you do is you're essentially trying to come up with ideas. And I think the inspiration for that can come through this idea springboard matrix approach. So how this can run is that the team who's going to be meeting up in the workshop is each assigned an area. So one might be assigned visual arts or portable technology or e-payment or the Internet of Things, etc., etc. Or maybe what's happening in a related but different but related category, or in a different but related country. And the idea is they just go off and they do some research. It's amazing how much you can find out purely through Googling. There's so much free information about what's happening. You can subscribe to newsletters. You can look at communities of interest and what people are talking about, etc., etc. And then they come back in the workshop, then basically share what they've learned. And after each person shares what they learned in an area, you then go, okay, does that inspire any ideas of what we could do differently or better in these areas, the areas down the left, in terms of our products or the way we distribute, or in our marketing, or in our pricing? So you're not trying to fill the whole grid. You're just looking for great ideas that you can adapt and apply. And effectively, that's how creativity kind of happens. It's the juxtaposition of two things that create something new. And this just makes sure that happens. And this really brings the team alive and introduces external ideas to the process. So I'm a big fan of this approach. In fact, you don't need just the concept of this can get you thinking. Just having that up on the wall when you're trying to come up with new ideas, it can even inspire it, especially if you've got people who are generally interested and curious about the world and clued up about what's going on in the room. Because that's innovation. That's what I get, media priority matrix. Now, I mean, the media world is getting increasingly complex, and you can easily get lost in the weeds thinking about very specific media formats even that you might want to use for your brand. But I'd advocate actually taking a bit of a step back and thinking about the broad type of media in the first place, that are right for your brand, given two things really. One is, are you actually in a category where people are interested? Usually that's because it's a high risk or high value purchase, but not always. Is there high interest in the category generally, and what therefore the brands are doing in the category, or is it low interest? How interesting? And the other one is about your own brand. Now, if you are lucky enough to have a brand that does deliver an exceptional user experience, better than competitors essentially, that the role of marketing and the broad media channels are going to be very different than if you're kind of, mediocre on the left. So just have a little think now, just for a few seconds, about a brand in the top right. So I'll give you, obviously you can think of any brand you like, but Tesla is a nice example of a brand that has delivered an exceptional user experience, driving experience, and other aspects of experience in a category people pay a lot of interest to, are very interested in. Have a just little think for a minute about the kind of the priorities for marketing, and therefore the media types, broad media types, and how that might be different from others. While I have a quick think. So the way this framework can be used is just, again, it's a thought piece. It's to get you thinking. What channel should we really be thinking about? So, for example, taking that example of Tesla, they know that when people sit in a Tesla, let alone drive it, they want one, or a lot of people do. So what they've invested in is having showrooms that are very accessible, so in shopping malls around the world, so that people experience it. And then you get the spin-off benefit of people then talking about that, earned media, telling other people, raving about it. My wife's a teacher, primary school, so sort of 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds, and kids skewed towards the boys actually would be looking out the window saying, "Is that a Tesla? That's a Tesla." And they're all mad about Tesla, and that's partly because they're interested and partly because their parents are excited, etc. And you get this incredible brand effect growing. You can see if you have a great product but you're in a much lower interest category, you're going to get less of that kind of buzz around the brand, so you will also need some paid media. But if you're in the unfortunate kind of low interest, mediocre brand in a slightly dull category, then actually you're going to need to use paid media to help drive your growth, to make something of that, create a story, for example, around the brand that makes it interesting and lifts it above the others through the interest in the brand rather than necessarily the product being superior. And I found that I wasn't expecting this, but this matrix is one of the ones that I've had so more feedback than any of the others from the book, just because I don't know why. I guess it's that stepping back, the ability to step back and think about media in a slightly different way. Okay, number 9. This is brand development and activation. This is because I absolutely love a nice, this is another kind of metaphor, another visual metaphor really, which is just a way of reminding you, well, I can have lots. It's useful sometimes to think of the contribution to brand development and then the activation of sales. So the way I used to think about it is that, there are certain channels in particular, like TV and cinema, YouTube, if it's unskippable, certainly, the ones that are good at telling stories and generating emotion, that get people interested generally in the brand. Their predisposition towards the brand is good. And that's a bit to the moment of the purchase decision moment, both physically close and or close in time, because what that can do, it can work in tandem with the midfielder brand development person by reminding the consumer of the great things about the brand to tip them over the edge. And I've used this for so that I can illustrate how many years I've used this for, because I used to talk about David Beckham passing to Michael Owen. So for those of you football fans will know how old this analogy is. I thought I'd invented it, but I did have a post from someone on LinkedIn the other day saying, "Oh, I've used it for 30 years." So I may have accidentally heard it off them and then thought it was my idea. But anyway, I don't care whose idea it is. It's a nice analogy for
Yeah.
talking to people about advertising.
So Dan, I want to ask you to pause for a second, because when you started explaining the difference between brand development and activation, I think there was a little bit of a lag on the screen. So I'm not sure if everyone was able to see or not. But in the interest of making sure that everyone does, can you cover the final leap that you're talking about, like what's the brand development doing, and that leads to the closing of the deal in the activation side. So maybe elaborate a little more on that.
I think we're back.
Okay. Yes, we are. So yeah, hate this, but sometimes it happens. So anyway, so what I was asking is that when you started explaining the brand development and activation piece, there was a little bit of a pause. So maybe you can, explain that, the what really is going on once again, and why are the two sides so damn critical?
Yeah, I'll just do it quickly again. Yeah, the idea is that there's some advertising that builds predisposition towards the brand generally, and the consumer might not even be in the moment when they need that product right now, even, but it's building that predisposition for when they do need it. And also it breeds predisposition for when you launch other products, you're automatically predisposed. So it's brand building, people call this, etc. And advertising that is great for getting people close to, in the consideration set, for example, but it won't necessarily on its own be that effective at activating the sale. And that's where, if you have channels that are near physically or near in terms of time to the moment where people make a decision, they complement each other, because it can remind people of the brand at the right moment and what's good about the brand to close the deal. And the two work brilliantly in combination. In fact, Binet and Field have done some research.
I was about to mention that as well.
They explain what the best ratio of the two types of advertising is on average. It's just on average, but it's
60-40.
It's okay, I'll try that again. I was just saying that the average ratio that's most effective is 60-40, 60 brand development to 40 activation. But the truth is that depends on so many other factors, the context of the brand circumstances and life stage, which I'll talk about in a minute. And it also depends on actually the quality of your advertising in the two areas. If you've got great activation, really strong activation advertising, you might want to put that right up to 80%, apparently. I've talked to modelers who tell me that can be the case. But just the concept that you need both is the main thing.
Yeah. I really like the work. I think Binet used it in one of his videos. He spoke about getting that predisposition towards the brand through brand building part, consistently over time, and you keep on doing that. And then he used the word which I loved was that you harvest all of that using activation.
That's nice.
And I really loved it.
In fact, I think my last framework, or one of my last frameworks, let me just go back to it now.
Yeah.
No, okay, it's not. I can do this as a follow-up. I'm happy to add this in, because there's the paper, the famous paper, I think it's called The Long and the Short of It by Binet and Field. It's excellent work. And yes, it talks about the complementarity of the two. And I do like that idea of, the brand building, brand development advertising. It puts savings in the bank. That's another analogy. Yeah, savings in the bank, and then you can pitch in some of that. Yeah, you get the same idea. Okay, cool. So back to the presentation. So the final framework is a framework I like because I did a lot of advertising research when I was at Kantar, and found that one of the biggest issues, especially for international brands actually, was that having like a global campaign, whereas advertising that was really good for a brand in a country where it was really well established, everyone knew about it and loved it, would be sometimes tested or used in another country where the brand is actually very new. It's been launched much more recently, and found that there was a big difference in advertising effectiveness. In other words, that's the idea that there are certain things that you need to do for launch and early stages of a brand that are different from what you do depending on your development of the brand. So the way I like to think about it is you can cut this up in different ways, but it's useful to think about 4 different phases, I suppose, of broad phases. That, we could be talking decades across the whole span of here. But it's to remember that when a brand that's early on in its life, you need to create awareness for the name of the brand, give the impression and make people realize this is a new thing and what it's for and what makes it special. Already you can see there's a lot of communication to be done there. And if you start worrying about doing some of the things that are further to the right, you won't have a focused launch and people won't even know what you're talking about. And that does happen occasionally. So that's the focus at launch. Then after that, for quite a few years usually, I mean many years in some cases, what you're trying to do is build that brand. You're trying to make the brand famous for its, the phrase I love is that, make the brand famous for its difference. And it becomes more and more famous, both in terms of generally a famous, well-known, familiar brand, but also famous for the thing that it is special and different about it, which will set it apart and get people to choose it. And all the while, you're trying to expand, you're trying to get more and more buyers. So again, this is what, you want to, ideally, if you can, get people to buy on more occasions, but ideally, you just want more people to buy it. And that will automatically mean they buy it more often. Because of the way that growth happens. And then later, when you're already very, very big, your job might be to block out the competitors by keeping your brand and spending enough to keep your brand dominant in the mind. I mean, think about what Coke does. It keeps the brand so salient. It's hard to think of any other brand in some cases, and even Pepsi struggles to even have a look in. And you create that emotional. So it shortcuts the decision making. It basically says the brand floods to mind when you're thirsty, need a drink or whatever, and you have this nice warm feeling about the brand. Why would you bother thinking about anything else? So some of the very biggest brands in the world continue to defend through emotion and saliency. And then obviously once in a while, you may need or have the opportunity to completely reinvent the brand, and sometimes you need communications to challenge people's perceptions and to change those perceptions. That's hard to do, but it can be done. I'm thinking Old Spice it's a good few years ago now, but Old Spice was a good example of a brand that quickly reinvented itself. And comms, it was driven mainly, I think, as I understand it, by the comms that got people amused and surprised and thinking about it in a totally new way. Clever strategy and execution there.
The manual,
Okay. Rahul, can I do a quick plug for my book then?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Well, you've already plugged it, which is great. So just, I told you it's like 25 years or so in the making. So it's full of, I think it's 75, just another 65 diagrams on top of the 10 you saw today, all obviously written up, explained, and also with anecdotes and examples throughout. It's a small book, physically small, and it's a quick read. People can read it in 2 or 3 hours. It's not heavy. It's not like a normal business book. It's succinct and visual and hopefully very clear for everyone. But it does have quite a few nice original ways of thinking about things that more experienced people, marketers, have found really helpful, as well as obviously the more newbies who want just an overview of modern marketing in all the different areas. The other thing I'd like to mention, because I'm very happy with my daughter, helped me, well, she really did it. She set up a website for me, which essentially houses the 75 illustrations and a whole lot more. I keep adding to them. There's already 120 or something like that in various different sections. So if you ever, and also I'm making it open. So if people want to use one of the diagrams, I've got high quality images. You just download them straight from the site. And all I ask is that you just keep the smartmarketing.me reference in the bottom of the thing, so that people can find the website and hopefully find me as well. So that's, apart from that, people can use any of them. There's some fun stuff in there, it's a fun browse, I would say. So that's it. So that's my top 10. Well,
awesome. So on the note of allowing people to download it from your website. I think that's really great. I think everyone's moving towards that version. And I also wanted to let all the viewers know that this entire presentation that Dan shared today he's kindly agreed to make it available to anyone who wants. So after this discussion, what I'll be doing is I'll put it up on my website and I'll share the link for anyone who wants to download the entire deck. So yeah, a bunch of questions, and I'll probably be the first one to start, and maybe I'm not sure if Tom happens to be a friend of yours, but there are a couple of comments and questions from him as well. So maybe you can take a look at them. But one of the first things which I really wanted to understand from you is there any specific framework or a set of frameworks that you used when you were doing the marketing of your own book? And the reason I ask is because there were aspects while you were talking through different frameworks that really made me relate to the way you have marketed yourself. And the one word which really stood out for me is the distinctiveness, which Biotop also keeps talking about. And I really love how you have made your brand absolutely distinct. Your illustrations are absolutely distinct. You've even made a self-portrait for yourself, and and the more you make it available to different people, the more it spreads, and the more people who use it, the more your brand spreads, with it. So that's something which I could see clearly.
I'm glad you did. Yeah, absolutely. There are two in particular, I would say, in the book. Obviously, the broad principles, but two in particular. I mean, one is called the 6 steps to launch success. And I was when I was doing this for the book, drawing it up for the book and writing it up for the book, I thought, I'll keep this in front of me once we're launching the book. So I remember to do them all. So there is an actual sort of steps to success, and I've stuck to most of them, I think. But you're right. The one that I'm passionate about is distinctive brand assets. So right from the start, I thought, right, I have to draw everything. So in fact, if you go on the website, this isn't live, so I can't click book. Yeah. If you do, click to the book. My daughter said, you can't put a photo of your book there because you're not allowed any photos. Don't forget, everything has to be drawing. So I had to draw my own book to put it on my website. So everything is drawn literally by, where's my Apple Pencil? Here's my iPad Pro, and I've got Apple Pencil. So everything is drawn by me. Also, that font you can you still see on screen, but the font you saw throughout, it's actually my handwriting turned into a font. So this is how my actual handwriting. I created it again on here. There was actually a free app that allowed you to do it. It took ages, but it was worth it. And I only have a color. You can see on the Pinata, I only use those colors. I do not use any other colors. I will not use any other colors, etc. Yeah. So yes, I'm hoping. Obviously, I'm hoping that the look of this, it's a brand. It's a little brand. My face is unfortunately part of that brand, but looks better when it's been drawn. I must admit, by the way, that picture there was drawn by my daughter, not me, because because I'm not good enough. So she did. So she's a bit better than me. Well, she's quite a lot better than me. So and she said, well, should I do it in your style? So it's like, okay. I had to pay her though, obviously, because she's her job has been delayed because of anyway. Well, so yes, okay. So that's it. Distinctive frameworks. Yeah. Oh, so you put another question.
Yeah, I put another question, and then maybe after this you can choose the next question if you want to. But I think I know what the answer is, but I really want your opinion.
To this question. Yeah. Yes, I think so. I tried to make everything broadly applicable, and you'll find in the book I use examples from all sorts of different categories and business, and as well as consumer. I think the process is less about story. No, yes, but you say the process is less about storytelling. But every company, every brand has a story. I'm a business brand. I'm trying to sell my is it their services? Yes, I thought it had gone. My services. And I try and tell a story. I mean, there is a story there. I talked about my background and my drawings, and I want to share them for free. This is all part of, because I am actually passionate about the power of visuals as a way of communicating better than just words on their own, sort of thing. Yeah. So that's my story. So I think so. I think actually, if you create stories within business-to-business marketing, you are more powerful. And I used to do that when I was marketing for Kantar. Actually, I used to bring back and try and tell the history of things, and that really helped actually. So, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, and personally, I'm not sure if a lot of people are aware of this, but again, Peter and Field, they've done some exceptional work with the IPA, and in the recent past, they've also done some amazing work with the LinkedIn B2B Institute. And what they have found in their work is that the 60-40 rule, the long and the short of it, most of these rules apply pretty much as they apply in the B2C world. They apply equally, if not more, in the B2B world as well. So brand building usually tends to become more important in the B2B world as compared to activation, which is usually something which is taken care of pretty well. Awesome. Yeah. So, okay. So I think, we've run out of time already. So I'll just make a couple of quick announcements once again. Firstly, follow the Decode Strategy Live page on LinkedIn and subscribe to the YouTube channel. So all the recordings from the live streams will be available on the YouTube channel. And apart from this, I just wanted to let you know that I do provide a strategic marketing course. And this course is available on my website, which is the decodestrategy.com website. And do check out the course. It's your easy way to earn that seat on the marketing decision table. So, okay, we are done with our plugs, and we are a little over the 1 hour mark, but I think it's probably time to say goodbye. And Dan, thank you so much for making the time. Thank you so much for taking us through, all the different frameworks that you have been working on. And there is a lot more. I have this book, and I can promise you there's a lot more that is there in the book. So
please. Thank you. You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yes. So thanks to all the viewers. Hopefully, I'll see most of you next weekend. We have Dilip Shankar, who is the founder and consultant at Center of Gravity, and they have been doing some amazing work with human-centered design, and he's going to talk through the entire human-centered design approach that they use. So see you all next weekend, and goodbye, Dan.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye.